People went about their chores. Children ran barefoot along dusty paths. Elders sat in the shade of the baobab tree, sharing stories of ancestors and old days. Among them was Amina, an 80-year-old widow, known to all as a woman who had seen seasons change and rivers dry and swell. Her hair was silver, her back bent from years of labor, and her hands were gnarled. Many thought of her as fragile. But Amina held a secret in her mind and spirit that none could see. She knew the forest like the lines on her palms. She knew every hidden path and every silent river crossing. She had learned them as a girl when she ran messages for her village elders. She had remembered them through decades of walking, listening, and observing. Few thought those skills would ever matter again. Life in Kofa Ridgeway was calm, peaceful, until that day. The wind changed first. It carried a sharp scent of fear. People began to murmur as the distant sound of footsteps reached the ears of the villagers. At first, it was faint. Then the clatter of machetes and shouted commands became clearer. Bandits had come from the hills. They had heard of the village's harvest and believed the old women and children would be easy prey. Panic spread faster than the wind through the thatched homes. Mothers screamed. Children clung to their fathers or ran in every direction. The village square became chaos. Smoke from startled fires mingled with cries. Amina, seated near the baobab, heard the noise and knew immediately what had happened. Her heart did not race with fear. Instead, it filled with quiet determination. She stood slowly, her legs shaking but her mind sharp as ever. She called out to the children and the elders gathered near her. "Follow me. Stay close. We will not let fear take us." The younger villagers laughed at her voice, filled with disbelief. How could an 80-year-old woman save anyone in the face of armed bandits? But the old woman's eyes held a command that silenced even the bravest of men. She led the children first, guiding them toward a narrow trail that few had walked in decades. This path wound through dense underbrush and along the river's edge. Only she remembered every hidden turn. As they moved, she whispered directions, nudging frightened children over rocks and under low branches. Every step was measured, every pause purposeful. Behind her, the bandits arrived in the village. They shouted and beat their machetes against trees and doors. Looting had begun, but Amina did not look back. She focused only on keeping her group safe. The forest welcomed them. Vines and leaves camouflaged their passage. Birds flew up in alarm, but the humans moved quietly. A child stumbled, and she caught him by the arm. "Steady, Quame. Watch your step," she said. Her voice was calm, even gentle, but every word carried authority. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time seemed to blur in the shadowed forest. The sounds of the bandits grew fainter. She knew they would eventually track the main paths. That was why she avoided them. She led her group across a narrow stream where the water was too deep to cross quickly, forcing any pursuers to slow down. She taught the children to whisper, to step lightly, and to follow without hesitation. The elders who walked with her, slow and unsure at first, gained confidence in her direction. Her voice, like a drumbeat, kept them together and moving. By mid-afternoon, they reached a hollow in the forest where a small cave had been used by hunters in years past. It was hidden by thorn bushes and shadows. She guided everyone inside, urging them to stay low. "Quietly now. The danger is near," she said. Outside, the bandits approached the main trail, furious that the villagers had vanished. Their shouts echoed, but the old paths Amina had remembered offered protection. From her vantage point inside the cave, she could hear their confusion. She could see their shadows moving through the trees beyond the opening. The group waited. Children whispered prayers. Elders murmured in surprise at the courage of a woman many had thought frail. Amina looked at their faces and smiled. Strength is not measured in age. It is measured in knowledge and heart. Remember this. Her words were barely audible but powerful enough to instill hope. She then made a decision that would define the village's story forever. She left the cave quietly, moving through the shadows of the trees toward the bandits. Her frail body became a phantom among the foliage. Using her knowledge of hidden paths, she created false trails, rustling leaves and tossing small branches in misleading directions. The bandits, seeing the evidence, followed the wrong tracks. Amina returned to the cave, her presence unseen, her plan unfolding perfectly. But just as she returned, a sharp scream pierced the air. One of the youngest children, Ya, had wandered from the group. Amina froze for a heartbeat, then without hesitation ran toward him. Her feet moved faster than anyone could have imagined for a woman of her age. The forest blurred around her. Branches lashed at her arms and face. Thorns tore at her skirt, but she ignored the pain. Reaching Yao, she scooped him into her arms and turned back toward the safety of the cave. Behind her, the bandits had noticed movement. The chase was on. Amina ran with a determination that made the impossible seem simple. Her body screamed in protest, but her mind and spirit carried her forward. The forest seemed to part for her as she led Ya through narrow passages and across hidden streams. The bandits were closing in, their voices angry and confused. She knew they would not give up easily. Every step mattered. Every breath was a battle against age and fear. When at last she reached the cave, she placed Ya down gently and whispered, "Stay here, stay hidden." The elders and children hugged her, their eyes wide with awe and relief. But the danger was not gone. Outside, the bandits were now aware that someone had escaped and were determined to find the source. Amina knew this was only the beginning. She took a deep breath and prepared to face the night. The forest grew darker as the sun dipped below the horizon. Shadows lengthened and merged into the thick underbrush. Amina moved among her group, whispering instructions to keep everyone quiet. The bandits were now close, their shouts echoing like distant thunder. She could hear the heavy footsteps of men tramping through the forest, breaking twigs and snapping small branches. The wind carried their curses and the metallic scrape of their weapons. She knew they would find the cave if she did not act swiftly. Amina gathered the elders first, urging them to remain silent and to conserve their strength. She assigned the older children small tasks, watching for shadows, listening for the faintest sounds, and helping the younger ones remain calm. Her voice carried a strange authority, born from decades of survival and intimate knowledge of the land. Even in darkness, they moved as one unit, guided by her presence. Stepping outside, Amina scanned the forest. The bandits were splitting into groups, searching methodically. She knew this tactic. It was what she had learned long ago from hunters and traders who had once tested her knowledge of the woods. She needed to create confusion, to scatter them, and to make the forest itself an ally. She whispered to herself as she moved, "The land remembers those who respect it. It will hide us if we listen." She collected fallen branches and leaves, dragging them across several narrow trails to create false tracks. She dropped small stones in rhythmic patterns, leading anyone following to believe the group had fled in a different direction. She mimicked the sounds of movement in places they were not. Every action was deliberate. Every sound was a message of misdirection. Inside the cave, Ya's small fingers clutched her skirt, and the child's eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Grandmother," he whispered, "will they catch us?" Amina knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No, my child. Courage is our shield, and the forest is our cloak. Stay close to me and trust the paths I know. We will outsmart them yet." The bandits, frustrated by the false trails, began to grow careless. One of them tripped over a root and cursed loudly. Another, seeing shadows move, fired an arrow into the air. Amina heard the metallic hiss and knew the danger was real. She pressed her lips together, her mind racing through possibilities. She could not risk confrontation. Her strength lay not in fighting but in strategy, in knowing the land as her oldest ally. Hours passed. Darkness deepened. The bandits' voices grew tired, their patience thinning. Amina decided it was time for the next phase. She led the group silently out of the cave, keeping them low and moving through the forest like shadows themselves. Her knowledge of secret paths was proving invaluable. She knew a narrow ravine that led to an abandoned hut near the river. Few in the village knew of it. She had discovered it decades earlier while escaping a storm with friends. Tonight, it would be their sanctuary. The journey to the hut was perilous. Branches scratched at their faces. Roots threatened to trip them. The river loomed ahead, black and treacherous. But she knew a crossing point few could find. She guided them carefully, testing each step before moving the group forward. Ya clung tightly to her back as they reached the riverbank. With practiced ease, she balanced herself across a narrow log and helped the children one by one. The elders moved slowly but steadily, reassured by her voice and hands. By the time they reached the hut, the bandits had begun to realize the villagers were not where they had expected. Their voices carried over the forest, angry and confused. Amina secured the door with a fallen branch and moved quietly to peer outside. She knew the bandits would search near water and main paths first. The hut's location, hidden and remote, gave her group a fragile advantage. Inside, the group huddled together. The hut was dark and cramped, but it offered shelter and safety. Children shivered, but Amina wrapped them in blankets she had carried along. She spoke to them softly, recounting old stories of brave hunters and clever elders. Her voice was a balm, calming their fear and reinforcing the courage they had already shown. Outside, the bandits circled near the river. They shouted threats, trying to lure the villagers into revealing themselves. Amina, listening, formulated the next move. She knew they could not stay hidden forever. The bandits would search until exhaustion forced them to leave or until they discovered the secret paths she had long ago memorized. She needed a plan to draw them away. She slipped outside, under the veil of darkness, moving as silently as a shadow. She dragged a pile of leaves and sticks along a side trail, creating the sound of hurried movement. Then she tossed stones into the river at intervals to mimic the crossing of several villagers. The bandits, hearing the distraction, rushed toward the sound. Their heavy boots pounded the forest floor, and their shouts carried far. Amina watched from the shadows, knowing that they were moving away from the hut. But just as she felt a spark of relief, a snap of a branch behind her froze her blood. One of the bandits had noticed movement in the shadows. He shouted, and a second figure emerged from the darkness, weapon raised. Amina's heart pounded, but her mind remained clear. She turned swiftly, sprinting down a hidden embankment she had discovered in her youth. The bandits followed, now fully alert to her presence. Her legs, though aged, moved with precision. Every step was calculated, every turn a trap for those pursuing her. She heard the chaos behind her, the bandits stumbling, shouting, and swearing as she led them away from the hut. Sweat streamed down her face, and her lungs burned, but she could not stop. The lives of children and elders depended on her. She ran with a determination that belied her age. The forest itself seemed to assist her, branches guiding her path and roots forming barriers for the pursuers. At last, she reached a narrow canyon. She knew that here she could split the bandits, forcing some to climb while others tried to find another path. She crouched behind a boulder, listening to their confusion. The air was thick with tension. The slightest sound could give her away. She held her breath and waited. A shout came from above. One of the bandits had misstepped and tumbled into a shallow pit. Another tried to help, but fell in after him. The sound of grunts and curses filled the canyon. Amina used this moment to slip further down the hidden path. Relief began to course through her veins, but she knew this was not yet the end. The night was far from over, and danger still lurked. The hidden path twisted and turned like a serpent, narrow and uneven, but Amina knew it like the back of her hand. Her legs ached and her lungs burned, yet every step was precise. Behind her, the bandits struggled through the canyon, cursing at every misstep. She listened carefully, timing their movements, and adjusted her pace to keep the distance safe, but close enough to ensure they remained disoriented. Her strategy was not to fight but to outsmart, to let the forest itself shield her people. Meanwhile, in the hut, the elders whispered prayers and offered comfort to the children. Ya clutched the hand of Amina's youngest niece, Na, eyes wide with worry. Grandmother will bring us through, Na said softly, though her voice trembled. The elders nodded, remembering the woman who had saved the village countless times in their youth through knowledge and wisdom. No one had ever doubted her before, and tonight was no exception. Amina reached a small clearing where the moonlight broke through the dense canopy, illuminating a narrow ridge that led to a cluster of ancient trees. She paused to catch her breath and scan the forest. The bandits were still in pursuit, but had begun to split, confusion evident in their frantic shouts. She knew they would grow careless if they believed the chase was nearly over. She whispered a quiet prayer of thanks to the land, then moved forward. Her path led to an old hunter's hut hidden behind thick vines and dense shrubs. She knew it had been abandoned for decades, yet it was well placed for an ambush. Amina led her group quietly, instructing the children to remain low and silent. The elders followed, trusting her guidance without hesitation. The hut offered shelter, but it also presented an opportunity. She set small traps around the perimeter, piles of dry leaves arranged to break loudly if stepped on, branches placed to tangle and slow anyone following. Every detail was intentional. The bandits, frustrated and increasingly desperate, were nearing the edge of the clearing. One of them spotted movement and raised an alarm, but Amina was already inside the hut. She had guided her people through a side entrance, a hidden slit in the wall that few could see. The children huddled together, whispering prayers and clutching each other for warmth. Amina moved silently, checking each corner to ensure the elders were safe and comfortable. Suddenly, the bandits arrived outside the hut. They searched with furious energy, banging on the walls and shouting threats. Amina crouched in the shadows, heart steady, and waited. She knew the terrain better than they did. She had memorized every tree, every rock, and every narrow path since childhood. They could not know what lay ahead. One of the bandits stumbled over a carefully placed branch and fell heavily, shouting in pain. Amina suppressed a sigh of relief. The traps worked. They slowed the bandits and bought precious time. She used the moment to signal to the group that it was time to move again. Every movement was choreographed, every step deliberate. She led them out through a hidden back passage, moving quietly, but quickly toward another secret path, known only to the village elders and hunters. The moon hung high, casting silver light across the forest. Amina guided the children over small streams and under low-hanging branches, always whispering encouragement and instructions. "Step carefully. Listen. The forest protects those who respect it," she said softly. Each word carried weight. Each command reinforced their courage. The group moved as one, shadows blending with the night, barely making a sound. Yet danger lingered. One of the bandits, more determined than the others, had noticed the false tracks earlier and had started to retrace Amina's path. He moved cautiously, but the forest was unfamiliar to him. Amina anticipated his movements, using the terrain to her advantage. She led her group across a narrow ravine, hidden from view, where he could not follow without risking injury. Every step she took was measured, every choice strategic. Hours passed in tense silence. The children grew weary but obeyed her every instruction. She whispered stories of clever ancestors and brave hunters, keeping their minds occupied and spirits alive. The elders, though older and slower, moved with renewed vigor, inspired by the courage of a woman many had considered fragile. At last, they reached a hidden valley surrounded by cliffs and dense vegetation. Amina's heart lifted slightly. This valley was known to her as a safe haven. Hunters had used it in years past to hide from raiders. Streams of clear water flowed through, and small caves offered shelter. She guided her group to a large overhang where they could rest. Exhausted but relieved, the children and elders settled down. Amina remained alert, scanning the perimeter. The bandits were still searching, but their numbers had dwindled, and their frustration was palpable. She knew that by dawn, most would abandon the chase, believing the villagers had vanished. She allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. But just as she began to relax, a sudden shout rang from the far edge of the valley. A small figure, barely visible, had been seen approaching the camp. Amina tensed, heart racing. Could it be another villager? Or had a bandit discovered their new location? She crept forward silently, every sense alert. The shadow moved closer, and in the dim moonlight, she saw a familiar face. Kwesi, one of the older boys from the village, his clothes torn, eyes wide with fear. "Grandmother," he gasped. "They took my sister." They went toward the eastern hills. Amina felt a surge of adrenaline. There was no time to rest. The safety of one more child hung in the balance. She looked at her group, seeing fear but also trust in their eyes. "Stay here," she whispered urgently. "I will bring her back. Do not move." She took a deep breath and prepared to venture into the unknown once again, knowing that the forest, her knowledge, and her courage were all she had to protect those she loved. Amina stepped into the darkness of the eastern hills with her heart pounding like a drum beneath her ribs. The night air was cold and dry. The forest seemed to hold its breath as she moved. Every tree felt like an old friend guiding her path. Every shadow felt alive. She had lived through 80 seasons in this land. She had walked these paths as a child and as a mother, and now as a guardian of the young. Her spirit carried the strength of generations. Her eyes remained sharp despite age and exhaustion. Kwesi followed behind her for a short distance before she raised a hand. "Stay here," she whispered. Her voice was soft yet firm. "I will go alone. The path ahead is narrow and dangerous. I know every turn. Wait for me until dawn. Keep yourself hidden." The boy nodded. His face was pale with fear yet filled with faith. Amina touched his shoulder, then turned away into the thick shadows. The eastern hills were not far, but the journey felt endless. She crossed silent streams that reflected the pale moonlight. She climbed narrow ridges that tested her balance. Thorns tore at her skin. Stones bruised her feet. Yet her steps remained steady. Her mind remained focused. She whispered old words of strength taught to her by her grandmother. The land seemed to answer with the rustle of leaves and the soft hoot of an owl. At last, she reached a rise overlooking a small clearing. There she saw a dim fire. Around it stood 3 bandits. They looked tired and angry. One of them dragged Kwesi's young sister Amma by the arm. The girl's face was streaked with dirt and tears. Amina crouched low. Her breath came slow and steady. She studied every movement of the bandits. She noticed their weapons. She noticed the places where the shadows gathered thick around the clearing. She knew she could not fight them head-on. Her strength lay in patience and knowledge. Amina circled the clearing. She moved like a silent ghost. She found a place where the shadows were darkest. She slipped behind a fallen log. From there she could hear the bandits speak. Their words were rough and filled with frustration. They talked about their failed search. They blamed each other. They were tired. They believed the villagers were far away. That weakness was what Amina needed. She waited for the right moment. The fire crackled. The bandits argued. One stepped away to gather more wood. Another bent to sharpen his blade. The third loosened his grip on Amma for a brief moment. Amina struck. She moved with the speed of a hawk. She grabbed Amma by the wrist and pulled her into the shadows. The girl gasped, but Amina covered her mouth gently. "Be still. Trust me," she whispered. Amma nodded. Tears fell silently down her cheeks. The bandits turned when they heard the rustle of leaves. They shouted and rushed toward the sound. Amina held Amma close and guided her through a narrow passage between 2 large boulders. The bandits followed. Their footsteps thundered across the ground. Amina kept her pace slow enough to keep them chasing, yet fast enough to stay ahead. She wanted them far from Kwesi and the valley. She wanted them deep inside the maze of rocks where their numbers meant nothing. The hills were filled with ancient formations. Tall stones stood like guardians. Crevices hid deep hollows. Amina knew this place as well as she knew the village paths. She led Amma through a narrow channel that curved to the left, then up a steep slope. The bandits scrambled after them, yet their heavy boots slipped on loose stones. One cursed loudly as he fell. Another shouted orders. Amina remained silent. Her steps were sure even in the dark. They reached a high ridge with a sharp drop on one side. Amina stopped there. She placed Amma in a small indent in the rock. "Do not move from here," she whispered. "Hold on to the stone and stay low." The girl nodded and pressed herself into the hollow. Amina then moved a few steps forward along the ridge. She picked up 2 stones and struck them together to create sharp echoing sounds. The noise bounced off the rocks and misled the bandits. The men charged toward the sound. In the darkness, they did not see the edge. The first stumbled and fell to his knees. The second collided with him. The third slipped and rolled dangerously close to the ledge. They shouted in panic. They scrambled backward in fear. In that moment, Amina stepped into the moonlight. Her silhouette stood tall and steady. She looked at them with fearless eyes. Her voice rose strong and clear over the wind. "Leave this land," she said. "The spirits of the hills watch all who walk here. You do not belong. Return to the plains and never come back. The forest has rejected you. The villagers have escaped your hands. Your greed has no power here." The bandits stared at her with wide eyes. Her presence felt larger than life. The ridge made her seem like a spirit of the ancestors. The moonlight framed her figure in silver. Fear washed over them. They whispered to each other. They took slow steps backward. Their courage drained like water from a cracked pot. At last, they turned and fled into the darkness. Their shouts faded as they stumbled back down the slopes. Amina watched until she was sure they would not return. Only then did she turn back to Amma. The girl ran to her and clung to her waist. Amina wrapped her arms around the child. Her body trembled with exhaustion, yet her spirit remained strong. She guided Amma down a hidden path toward the valley. The journey was slow yet peaceful. The hills seemed to open before them. The trees whispered praise. The night carried the soft song of crickets. When they reached the valley, Kwesi ran toward them with a cry of relief. The elders surrounded Amina. Children hugged her legs. Tears of joy flowed freely. They offered prayers of gratitude. They praised her courage. They called her the protector of Koforidua. Amina smiled softly. Her heart swelled with love. She had saved her people once more. At dawn, they began the journey back to the village. The forest guided them safely. When they reached Koforidua, the villagers gathered around them in awe. They listened as the story spread from voice to voice. Amina, the elder who outran thieves. Amina, the woman who used wisdom to defeat danger. Amina, who showed that true strength lives in the heart and not in the body. That night, the village held a feast in her honor. Drums echoed across the land. Children danced around the fire. Elders shared stories of courage. Amina sat near the flames with Amma and Kwesi beside her. She smiled at the young faces lit by firelight. She felt peace settle over her like a warm cloth. She knew the village would remember this night for generations. And as the stars rose high above the baobab tree, Amina whispered a final prayer of thanks. She had not saved the village through muscle or speed. She had saved it through wisdom, patience, and love. And that truth became the greatest lesson the people of Koforidua ever carried forward into the seasons yet to come.